Well, good morning and happy Sunday, and welcome to Unity of Kern County on the 16th day of May, 2021. I am Reverend Chuck, and today we're going to look at the spiritual meaning found within the stories of Jesus fishing and how it applies to us in today's world. Now, of course, the materials I share with you each Sunday are based upon the spiritual lessons, principles taught by Jesus and Unity of Worldwide Ministries, as well as my 28 years as an ordained Unity minister. And of course, as we do each Sunday, we acknowledge the presence and power and activity of God as we pray the Charles Fillmore prayer, in the presence. I am now in the presence of pure being, and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge your presence and power, O blessed Spirit. In your divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations, and from your pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to your perfect law. And so it is. Now, the writers of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all have stories about Jesus and fish. And Jesus' opening in both Matthew and Mark deal with him finding his disciples among the fishermen on the shores of Galilee. And Luke, of course, goes a little bit further and adds Jesus teaching the people from Simon Peter's boat, and also going out into the sea to catch fish. The writer has, of course, Simon Peter complaining to Jesus that there aren't any fish out there. And Jesus says, well, let's go anyways. And of course, they catch so much fish that they can't bring the nets into the boats, and they have to call upon other fishermen that are out there, their friends nearby, to help them pull the huge amount of fish into their boats. Now, Simon Peter sees this as a miracle and joins Jesus as one of his disciples. Now, the writer of John has Jesus standing on the shore, watching the men cast nets for fish. And of course, he yells out to them, "Have you caught any fish today?" To which the answer is no. So Jesus instructs them to cast their net on the right side of the boat, and to their amazement, the net is so full that they can hardly pull it into the boat. At that moment, Peter realizes it's Jesus on the shore and jumps in to go meet him. Now, as we learned in our Bible classes, many of the stories found in the Bible have a more spiritual meaning to them. And that's the beauty of biblical study, and why the Bible still holds many truths, many lessons that we can use today in our life and in our affairs. You'll find, if you really look, a lot of metaphors, a lot of idioms, parables, and allegory that were often used by the writers to help people understand the meaning and the lesson behind the message that they wanted to impart. So we're going to take another look at the spiritual lesson that can be found in these stories by the writers of the Synoptic Gospels and, of course, John. Now, the first thing we see, of course, when Jesus starts his ministry is he goes looking for disciples, fishing for men, if you will, who would later become fishers of men. Now, Jesus represents the Christ essence. And what is the Christ essence? It is that spiritual DNA that God placed in each of us. It is that image and likeness of God that is within each of us. It is, of course, what St. Paul said, the Christ in you, your hope of glory. We all have it. The question is, do we acknowledge it? And do we allow it to have its rightful place in our spiritual journey while we're here? Now, the disciples that Jesus called to help him in his ministry represent the 12 spiritual attributes that, when empowered through that Christ essence, help us navigate the human condition. It's interesting to note that the first two that Jesus called happened to be Simon Peter, who represents faith, and of course, Simon's brother, Andrew, who represents strength. Now, when we think about that, we only have to realize that when we embark upon a project or a change in our lives or some direction we want to take, it's always best to start off by allowing and recognizing the Christ in us to embolden our faculty of faith and strength so that we can go forth and allow that transformation that needs to be happen. And when it does happen, it is at the highest and best of all concern. The Christ in us calls forth our spiritual powers of faith and strength so that we can succeed in all our endeavors. You know, you always want people of faith and of strength, of conviction around you on any project that you wish to endeavor so that you can be sure of success. Now, the C represents a twofold activity that we can use to remember that God's good pleasure is to give us the kingdom of all that is good. So an acronym for the spiritual understanding of the C is simply supply, everlasting, and abundant. It is God's supply, everlasting, and abundant. Now, the C, on a very human level, represents our consciousness. And of course, we understand that our consciousness contains all aspects of our being, both physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So it contains all those beliefs that are both negative and positive that we hold on to about ourselves and, of course, the people around us and the world in which we live. And sometimes the negativity tends to come out. And of course, we see this being played out in the discourse between Jesus and Simon Peter. Because Jesus sees everything on a spiritual level. Simon Peter, however, is stuck with the limited condition. As he states, well, you know, I've fished all day and there's nothing to catch. Well, Jesus, knowing that the sea represents a supply that is everlasting and abundant, shows Peter that his negative belief isn't necessarily true. Now, keep in mind that faith also has two faces. Negative faith that aligns itself with the so-called Murphy's Law, which we all know states, if anything can go wrong, it will. And of course, the positive faith that knows that with God, all things are possible. It's the kind of faith that says, yes, that there are obstacles. I understand that there are obstacles here, but those obstacles aren't going to keep me from my goal. For with God, all things are possible and can be overcome through the Christ in me, my hope of glory. Now, the fish represent divine ideas that come from God to help and nourish us as we set out to do the work that is ours to do by divine right of consciousness. Sure, there are times that our nets will pull in junk. What do we do with junk is that we throw it into the junk pile and instead keep focusing using our spiritual powers of faith and strength on the truth that our supply of good ideas and concepts and models will be available to us to achieve a successful outcome. Now the net. The net represents the never-ending transformation, NET. The net is our never-ending transformation process that helps us overcome the negative aspects of the human condition so that we can experience spiritual growth and awareness of God's great abundance of all good. So, why did Jesus instruct Simon Peter to throw his net on the right side of the boat? Well, again, the right side of the boat represents, from a spiritual level, right action, right thinking. When we align ourselves with God, we have a right understanding. And through that right understanding, we realize that all our needs will be met. Jesus understood this and used it to teach a new way of having a relationship with God. Now, that is my take on the spiritual meaning behind Jesus and the fish. Now, I'm going to give you a modern day take of how we fish today. It's taken from a book by Glenn Dromgoole, and it's called I'd Rather Be Fishing. And in it, Glenn reminds us that if you're going to go fishing, be aware that there are certain fishing tips that we must understand and use and be aware of while we navigate that human condition. Number one, always go where the fish are. They're not on land, they're out in the water, they're out in the sea, and that's where you want to go, the lakes. Go where the fish are. And if you're new at fishing, number two, then understand the theory of fishing, how it applies to your own life and the application of that process. Because there are rules to fishing. And three, when we are within the human condition, fishing also has many components to it, such as we fish for compliments. We fish around for information. We bait others into giving us things, and we lure others into meeting our needs. Who of us have not used one or more of those things in our own lives? Fishing also has its own language. We toss out our line. We fish or cut bait. These all deal with making a commitment. And we also bite on the hooks people bait. How many times have we responded to someone, they have baited us? Okay. We end up falling hook, line, and sinker for some of the things that have been put out there. Yeah, we can laugh at these things because in reality, they are pretty true. 5, fishing focuses our mind on the moment. If you've ever been out there, there's a lot of time that you're just still. No action, no nothing, you're just still. And 6, spiritual metaphors. Done mostly on Sundays, some of the disciples were fishermen, early Christian symbol used as an illustration for paying taxes and prosperity. 7, it teaches patience. Because if you notice, you never can force the fish to bite. You can move your location, but you can't force them to bite your line. 8, fishing produces hope and faith for us. Tossing out the line, we hope the fish will bite, and then having faith that they will. 9, we stay together. You know, fish stay in schools. And why do they do that? They do it for safety from predators. So you want to align yourself with people of like mind. And finally, 10, when a fisherman asks, what's your net worth? He's not asking about how much stock or assets that you might have. No, it's about how it helps you catch your abundant supply of good. So this week, if you find time to go out and do a little fishing, may your catch be abundant. Now, friends, at any time, if you have a question about any of the material that I have discussed, please feel free to contact me through Messenger on Facebook or my email at revchuckunity@yahoo.com. That's revchuckunity@yahoo.com. And I want to thank all of you who follow and subscribe to both my channels on YouTube, Unity of Kern County, and of course the Facebook page group, Unity of Kern County, and of course for the financial support that helps Unity of Kern County bring you these messages on a weekly basis. So until next week, remember to be good to yourself and to others. God bless you, dear friends.